If you search Bitwig comping in YouTube, you get tons of results. So I'm not going to go super deep into this. I will, of course, just cover the workflow and all that good stuff and then give my own opinions. But I'm sure everything that's needed to be said on the subject has already been said. But for the sake of completion and just wanting to hit all of the features, we'll go over it in this video. First things first, Bitwig's comping feature is one of these rare things that's very much like utility first. It's designed to help you accomplish a very just basic audio editing task in an efficient and streamlined way. So you can, of course, still use this creatively, but it's not one of those things where it's creativity first, utility second. It's very much utility first. And so if you are someone who does a lot of recording of, say, guitar or vocals, this is going to be a feature that you use all the time. If that's not something that you traditionally or typically do, it's a feature that you may not use very often or maybe not at all because it just won't be relevant to you. But anyway, we've gone ahead and we've set this up. So first things first, if you're primarily a clip launcher user, be aware of this particular option here from the play menu, record as comping takes. We'll just go ahead and set that up and set it to 4. This just means when we are recording our takes, it's going to automatically create those as comping takes. So let's go ahead and set this up. So here we go. And there's an example of it. So we can see that we get this little icon appearing here that's indicating to me that this is now a comping clip. So if I click and I bring this up, by default, we actually don't see what's happened with the comping. We just see the audio events, which is how this ends up being rendered. So I'll click on comping, and now here we can see that we have our comping takes, and we will come back to this in just a second. Now, if you primarily work on the timeline view, if you have a looping clip set up, by default, it then will also kind of record these as comping takes. If you do not have looping set up, you have to do like a fold to takes thing where you could right click this if it's any kind of an audio track and fold to takes, and then that will kind of do the same thing as long as you know the duration. So in our case here, the only thing I have to be careful of is having this overdub turned on, because that means then it's going to be trying to continually record those MIDI clips or play them back as it goes through. So I just went ahead and turned that off, but we're going to set up basically the same thing here, and this will be our output audio that's getting recorded as comping takes. So here we go. Okay, so we've accomplished that same goal there. You can see this like so when I double click and I bring it up. So now we have two different examples. We have the one that we did as a clip launcher, and then we have the one that we did on the timeline. Now, in our specific situation where we have a synthesizer and we could record MIDI and audio, and we want to keep a record of what we've done with the MIDI, the best way to go about doing that would be to use these post-record actions here inside the project panel and have that going and recording the MIDI scene after scene after scene, but having the audio record just here on the timeline. So I will show you how I would go about setting that up. You can see that I'm just gonna hit the record here, everything's enabled, and let's see if this works the way we want it to. Okay, so here we have our 3 different takes, And then we can double click in here and you can see that we get those 3 different takes and then that 4th one that we wouldn't actually be using. So in this case, I would then do my comping from here on the timeline and just have these as a record and probably write take 1, take 2, take 3 in case I needed to go back and alter anything with the synth patch and then re-record it or something like that. So you probably never actually do this, but just so you're aware that you can. So I'm going to do one more take, and this time what I'll do is every 4 bars, I'm going to like change the preset just so that we have something more interesting to work with from a comping standpoint. Okay, so that should be something we can then actually go and work with. So just to make my life easier, I actually took this clip and I dragged it onto the arranger timeline. Now we're just using the arrangement timeline and we're going to work with it over there. So let's get rid of that and let's go back into our edit view. And now we can listen to our first take. If I use the arrow keys, I can get through and listen to different takes. Another thing I can do on each take is I can hold the Alt key and I can actually drag this around. Now, it can only drag around as long as the audio recording is. So you can see when I pull back like this, I'm now starting to get some of that second take. So that's actually kind of cool in its own right. And so like you can see with the way that I dragged it and watching that timeline up there, I was able to kind of just like keep things in time to some degree anyway. This is not going to work with the snapping mode, I don't believe. So you can see when I move this around, it's not going to like snap into place for me, but that will become useful, that snapping feature, when we do more of the traditional stuff. So I'm going to try to see if I can figure out how to get this back to the original starting point. And that's probably about as good as I'm going to be able to do. And maybe I even do want to drag this back a little bit so I can kind of put it back into time. And I'm just watching that here at the end. That actually seems a little bit early. Okay, so we have that there. Now, if I want to create a like second little lane somewhere to comp this together, I can just click and I can drag. So let's say that I want like just the second half. I'm watching it with that timeline. That should be that halfway point. So now it's going to jump up and play that second half. And we can still hear that this is not quite in time the way that we want it to be. So again, I'm going to click and I'm going to drag. If I want to move everything, I can hit the Shift and the Alt key, and now you can see that both are actually moving. So let's just be kind of crazy with it. And that would probably be a good time to go and transition to this one on the close. And maybe I'll grab this first little part for the beginning so we get a hit at the start. Although that's not making any sound. Interesting. So I'm going to hit the Alt key here. And I'm just going to drag it over a little. So that was kind of cool. So now in these regions, whenever I select any of these, I can start to use my arrow keys. So I can like click the right arrow key to get this and then decide if I want to hear the blue instead. And maybe this one I'll bring up. So that's kind of cool. And then maybe, again, I can use my Alt key here to drag this around to get a more interesting starting point. So let's try that instead. That actually was not any more interesting. So let's really drag it through here and be kind of aggressive and weird with it. So yeah, let's just take that. Now, if I need to turn the volume down on this particular take, I can do that if I can highlight the right location. There we go. So now when I come up here, I get access to more of the audio event level stuff. So let's bring that volume down just to make sure it's basically the same with the next part that comes in. And again, I can bring this volume down a little bit. And then again, I might take this one and drag it just a little bit. We'll take that second hit instead. So what we can kind of hear is causing a problem is now this part seems like it's off at the end. So I still want that last note to be kind of the last thing that happens, but it's not in the location that I want it to be. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click this plus button here. That's actually going to commit the changes that we have to a new take. And you'll understand why I did that in a second. So I'm going to click that over. We now have those changes that were committed. But now what I could do with this particular one, and I'll just go ahead and click it here, is I can now drag this over and try to get it to a better spot where I want it to be. And we'll have to turn the volume up. And obviously the only part that's really annoying is just because I played it so badly is trying to figure out where this needs to go. So realistically, what we'd probably have to do is find, again, a different part to go in here to try to make more of like one cohesive unit. But that's the general idea. And then if I like what I have done, I could commit this. And then I'm going to double click this one. And now we kind of have this comped take as our final. But now you'll notice if I was to try to take that, and that got all messed up, but if I was to try to take this and drag it around, you can see that we're not getting to see any of like the other clips like we did before based on what we've committed. So at that point, this is kind of what we have. And then again, we can kind of do this whole process again and try to create a new part. But that is really the basics of it. And then when you go into the audio events, you now can see the different events that were created at those like comp points. And then you do have control over things like the crossfading. And if you really wanted to get wild, you know, you could go in on an audio event by audio event basis and do some like editing or mess around with the pitch or the formant or whatever it is that you want to do, play with the stretching, and then you could really get some unique and interesting parts. Or again, like, you know, we talked about in the previous video with the operators, you could actually come in here to the operators and take advantage of those and mix things up and get wild and crazy. So that's where you're going and moving away from utility and into more of that creative sphere. But as you can see, the actual fundamental process and technique of comping is a very just like straightforward utility thing where with my example, it's kind of silly, but you could see how powerful this would be with a vocalist or like a guitar part, or if you were recording drums over and over again, how you could take advantage of it. The following two examples are going to be a little more experimental, a little more creative. Whether or not you'd ever do this, I don't know, but just to try to highlight some of the power to this comping system. So basically, here's like, you know, a patch that once you hit the latch key will go on and play forever. So I'm going to kind of create like a little soundscape, record for 2 minutes, have it making those comping takes for me, and then go in and kind of like grab different bits and pieces and kind of turn it into a unique loop. And it's something that I probably would never want to try to attempt to do just as like audio tracks, as multiple different audio tracks. So here would be, you know, maybe an example of something a little more creative. So let's go ahead and set this up. And of course, I'll just jump to after I've made my parts. So what you can see here is we have 8 different takes, and then we also had a 9th take with a little bit of an overhang. And basically what I did on that one is I used the Alt key and I just shifted it all the way over so that what we're left with is silence. So if I do want to put in a little piece of silence, I could do that using this 9th take. So that was the reason. If we go and listen here, we can hear that it's pretty varied. So what I'm going to do is basically at random, I'm just going to grab a few little chunks. I've turned on the snapping again and just a couple of features that I don't think I showed before. One thing you can do is, and you can do it either down here or actually up on the, comping result, is when you see the up arrow, you can drag and move those together, or you can just take, your spot here, and when you're lower, let me get there again, you can pull that over. So a couple options that I didn't show previously that you can do if you're so inclined, and you can see that we're leaving gaps in here that we could either fill in or use that silence for. So either way will work fine to create the silence, but I'm just going to go through here now and just kind of have a little bit of fun adding in a bunch of spots. And you'll see that this is only going to take a tiny bit of time. All right, so we now have, several little spots here, and I'm just going to go through and just kind of move some of them around and make this interesting. Leave that there. Give us a little more silence. All right, so let's take a listen to this now, see what it sounds like. Okay, so now let's go ahead and let's adjust some of the volume levels here just to bring some stuff up. Normalize it as best as we can just with our field of vision. I think I'm going to add in a little something. All right, so I think that's kind of cool. So I'm just going to commit it. And this is the take that we want. And now we'll just do a tiny bit of effects processing to it. So we'll just bathe it in reverb, add some kind of a delay to it, and then we'll just EQ it a little bit. Okay. So after just playing with a little bit of effects processing, this is now the result we have. And then I'm just going to maybe shape it a little bit further just to make it a bit darker. So obviously that's a pretty cool use of the comping if you're willing to get creative with effects processing and just, not let logic dictate your decisions. So one thing you've probably noticed, and this is more of just a method, I'm not really going to go through the whole entire process or an example because I doubt I would ever do it, but you can just drag and drop things on as additional takes. So from here, the problem is I can't really move that around. Now, if I double click, it's only going to give me the duration of the longest sample here. Now, once I do get it up into this area, if I commit this as a new take, and then I double click it in, you'll see that now I actually do have this filling up the entire space, and I could move it over somewhere else if I wanted to do that. And then let me get back there and then kind of isolate this as the region of the take. Or move it around if I wanted to. Okay, but that's not like the most intuitive or best way to kind of handle this. What I think I could see people doing is taking a bunch of kind of random loops, making sure that they're all, the same duration of what you're going to be working with here, bringing all of those guys on, and then kind of playing around with them a little bit. So I'll show you what I mean in a second. All right, so what I've done is I've taken 4 just very different random synth loops, made sure to stretch them, made sure that they all would be going for over 8 bars. And now what I can do is if I go into the file browser and I go into my bounces, all of these should now work really nicely to do a little like mashup thing with. So I'll go into the comping here and I'll just bring them all in individually so you can see how I would do this. 2, 3, 4. All right, so now in this particular clip, we could get, a little more creative and just grab some random portions of things if we wanted to do that, and probably turn snap on and, whatever. So I could now do something like this. And then maybe grab this little portion. And then maybe bring this back again. And just switch it over there randomly. So, you can see that this is like totally kind of random and bizarre, but I think for certain genres of music, you could definitely do something like this and it would probably work. So one more time. If you needed to, you could kind of come in and then fine tune things further from the audio event level. And so that's where I'm going to leave things on comping. Hopefully you can see the utilitarian value in this, as well as maybe some more of the creative aspects and applications if you want to go down that road. Thank you for watching and have a wonderful day.